Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Broken Knights Games. My name is Sam and I'm a software developer and I make games. So lately I've been busy making some art assets for the game I'm building called Sumo Showdown, and today we're gonna finish our Desert Rocks project that we started in my previous video. So just to recap, in case you didn't see it, we used Mudbox to sculpt a desert sandstone rock formation, and then we loaded our model into Blender to lay out our UV maps so we could start the texture process. So if you missed part 1 of this series, I would encourage you to go check it out. There'll be a link in the description where you can go and find that. So in this video, I'll show you my process for creating a diffuse texture map and how to take our high poly sculpted detail and bake that into a normal map, and how to set up our new model in Unity so that we can use it in our game. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more game dev videos and tutorials. Alright, let's paint some happy rocks. Okay, so we are here in Mudbox, and now we're going to start creating some texture maps for our desert rock. So first of all, I'm going to go under the paint layers, and we're going to add a new layer. And then I'm going to call that layer, we'll just call it black, under the diffuse channel. Okay, hit enter. And now I'm just going to grab the paintbrush tool and solid black. And I'm just going to go around and cover the entire surface with a nice black base coat. I always like to start with black and then add color layers on top of that. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly set up a color palette so we have all of our colors easily available to use as we paint the rock. I created this palette image using Adobe's online color tool. It's free, so if you've not used it before, I would highly recommend checking it out, as it will help you build a very nice color palette that adheres to color design rules. I'll add a link in the description. So with the palette image loaded in, I just use the eyedropper here and add all the colors to the quick select color tiles, and I'll start with the darkest orange. So now I'll create a new layer and we'll call it base coat, and then click OK, and then we'll go to the airbrush tool, and we'll have a stamp image here. We'll see how that looks. So I'll change the color to the darkest orange. And you know what, I'm going to change this to the same texture that we used to create the rock bumpiness on the surface. So just go on the surface of the airbrush, and you can see how the stamp image affects the spray. And you know what, I don't really like this. Let's get rid of it. Once again, beauty of working with layers. You know, if you don't like it, delete it. And all your changes are isolated to that layer, so always remember to add a new layer. Alright, so now I'm just going to go around the entire surface with just the standard airbrush and build up some color on top of this black here to get that sandstone orange. So you can see the surface here looks a little glossy, so I'm just going to go under the material presets and we'll try picking a new one here. So I end up using this gray flat material. So this isn't like super important because we'll be creating a new material when we import into Unity, but I just like to get something that looks pretty close to the end result, so we, paint the textures appropriately. Okay, so I have that gray flat material, so now I can just finish with the base coat color of the orange. Continuing on, I create another layer using the airbrush tool again, this time picking the next highest color on the palette. Also experimenting with some stamp images to get some variation in the coloring, so it's not just all flat colors being sprayed on. Add some character, gives it some realism. So now I'll repeat this process again by adding a new layer, picking the next color on the palette, but this time I'm going to use the dry brush tool, and what this will do is it'll simulate a paintbrush that has like a very light amount of paint on it. So then you can see as I go over the surface here, it just kind of picks up on the higher areas and it leaves the lower areas untouched. So I like this tool a lot for adding some highlights to some of the higher areas easily without adding too much color. Next, I'll add another layer, but switch back to the airbrush and a different stamp image texture while also using the next color on our swatch. And then I'm going to go around some of the edges and just add a little bit of highlight to make the shape pop. Just kind of go on, some of these raised creases here. Just adding some more highlights, maybe a little bit more intense than you would with a dry brush. More focused. Once again, I'll add another layer, so we're going to use the final color on our palette here, and I'll add some finishing touches. And I end up using a dry brush here with the noisy stamp image to give it like a sand or dust-like wash. Okay, this looks pretty good. I'm going to save it, and then you'll see once I pull in the reference image here that we have a pretty similar end result, and I'm happy with it. So now the next thing we're going to do is create a normal map, and what a normal map is, it's a texture map that represents how lights and shadows appear across surface of a model. So we'll take our high poly sculpted detail and bake that into a normal map, and then we'll add it to our low poly model so that we can use it in a game engine in like an optimized fashion. So I'm going to go to UVs and maps and extract texture maps, new operation. I'll select normal map, and then under the target models I will add our level 0 low poly mesh, and then on the source models we'll add our level 7 high poly mesh. Under method we're going to do subdivision because that's what Mudbox is recommending, and then we'll change the we'll do 4x anti-aliasing. I'll just help with jagged edges, and we'll do a 2K texture. So now we're going to go to our folder and select the output path for this map, and then we'll add a name. I'll call it CR Rock 02 normal. Then we'll click save, and we'll click export, and Mudbox will go and calculate the normal map. This may take up to a minute or so depending on your model and your machine, and it finished, so we'll close that. And you can see the normal map is applied, which looks bad because we're on the highest level. So I'll step down to 0, and you can see that all of our detail is still here because that is all now baked into the normal map, which is then applied to this model. So that's how we're able to achieve high levels of detail with low polygon count. Alright, so now we're going to export everything so we can bring it into Unity. So I'm just going to right click on the diffuse channel and say export channel merged, and we'll browse to where we're going to export it. Same folder, and we'll just call this CR Rock to diffuse. All right, now we're just going to export the model. So I'll go to File, Export, Selection, and we'll call this CRRock2_fin for finished or final, and then we'll click Save. And then the next step will be to bring this all into Unity. Okay, so we have Unity opened up. I just opened up a new project here, default settings, default 3D project. So we have just a sample scene here. So I'm going to add a new game object. We'll just call this CR Rock 2. And then over on the left here under assets, I created a materials and a models folder. I just like to organize the stuff I bring in. So if I bring in the file explorer here, we can have the files that we just exported from Mudbox. So we're going to need our diffuse texture here and the normal. So I'm just going to select those and drag those into materials. And then I'm going to select the crrock2 fin.obj file and drag that into models as well. Alright, so now I'm going to, under this new object I added here, I'm just going to reset the position to 0. Okay. And now I'm going to drag in our crrock2 mesh under that object. Okay. So we have the camera just looking at this here. And you can see it's just using the default Unity material. So we're going to have to create a material for our rock that we created. So under materials, I'm just going to go to create and select material. And we'll call this CR Rock 02, if I can type, MAT. And then we're going to drag that material onto the model to assign it. And then under the material properties, under the material properties here, we have a couple maps we can import. So this is going to be a pretty basic texture. So we're going to drag our diffuse onto the albedo. And we're going to drag our normal onto the normal map. And you can see here it says that this texture is not marked as a normal map. We want to click Fix Now. Okay, so that will allow us to modify the intensity of this. Obviously, if you crank it up, it looks really bad. So we're just going to leave that at 1. But another way you can fix that normal map is when you import into Unity, if you click under the file itself, you can see this texture type drop down, and it'll be default in most cases, but you can just change it to normal map and then click apply. Pro tip. So then under our material, you can see that the rack looks a little glossy, not quite what we have here in Mudbox. Kind of flat here, so we're just going to modify this material properties here. I think all we need to do is really bring down the smoothness. Yeah, so it looks about right. And I'll bring up the metallic a little bit. Just try to get a little bit more of that orange color we had. I think that looks pretty close. So there you have it. We have a rock model that we created in Mudbox and painted in Mudbox, and now it is ready to be used and placed in a game. So there you have it. To summarize, we created our very own environmental rock asset, which was created via 3D sculpting. We then were able to bake all of that sculpted detail into a normal map, which was then applied to a low poly version of our mesh. Finally, we created the color diffuse texture map by painting the model. We were able to do all of this using Mudbox 2019. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how Mudbox works and what you can do with it, and how you can start using it to create your own 3D assets to integrate into your games. But if you found this video helpful, leave a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And also, if you have any questions or feedback, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you want to see more progress on my game dev projects like Sumo Showdown, or if you want to see more game dev related videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.